Welcome to A Diary of a Professional Tennis Coach with Mark Gellard and Candy Reed, sponsored by the ERT 300. Well, no Mark today, unfortunately, because he is in the middle of Indian Wells and Miami. But it's just me, Candy Reed, and delighted to say that Ingrid is alongside. Ingrid is, this has been a few months in the making. We met at Wimbledon at the All England Club. I think it was at the end of 2024 when I asked you to come on the podcast. We were trying to make it work at the Australian Open, but finally, here in March during Indian Wells, we get the job done. So a warm welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Candy.
It's lovely to have you on. I'd love to start, if we may, just talking about your early start in tennis. Of course, the podcast is called Diary of a Professional Tennis Coach, and I'd love to know what you think makes a great coach. But let's start with your career in tennis, because you were one of the world's best.
Well, to start talking about the coach, I can do that very swiftly and very quickly because I never had one. So that's my experience. Next question, please.
Next question is, how did you get started in tennis?
My family, the whole family, my brother, my mother and father. My father was the president of the club, and my mother was very, very instrumental in the whole tennis environment in Malmö, where I'm born and raised. She was the president's wife, and then took on all the kids who played. So still to this day, I get people seeing me in the street when I'm in Sweden and saying, "Oh, you're Asta's daughter." I've got my own name from playing tennis and various other things, but to hear being mentioned that I'm my mother's daughter makes me inordinately proud. And she actually coached these young people and was a second mother to them and fulfilled a very, very important position, which I think has stayed with me all my life. Because looking at coaches today and looking at the lack of female coaches, it's really sad, because I think there are positions for women where they can really create a very good work and very thankful in society, very important work by not only being a coach on a technical basis, but also an emotional one.
Mm. So you said you didn't have a coach, but really your mum was your coach, I presume, throughout your career. Was she the person you consulted if you needed to?
Well, he didn't do that at the time I grew up. It wasn't the same at all. My father went to see me playing competitively in Stockholm for the first time. And it was a handicap tournament, i.e. you start on a minus or a plus, depending on how good you are. And I was at that time about 22, 24. He'd never seen me play. My mother, she was too nervous. She was a big smoker. She would smoke 2 fags at the same time when I was playing. So she declined to go and watch it all. So I never did. And that wasn't part of the thing. However, they were an enormous part in my tennis life. So, but in a different way.
So what kind of way then? Were they the ones that were encouraging you, motivating you, inspiring you? And where did the love essentially for tennis come? Because being a tennis player like you were, a top 15 in the world player, that requires a lot of effort, doesn't it? It's not something you say, well, I'll just play a little bit of tennis and see how it goes.
Depending on how talented you are. Sorry. No, and I was almost even cheekier and saying, and money. You needed, Dad paid for just about everything. You never had any money from anywhere else. So in the end, I remember playing in Monte Carlo. So you played on the Côte d'Azur or the Riviera before, in the tournaments before Monte Carlo. And then, you were eating, okay. And all of a sudden the tournament sets in and the prices go sky high. So I allowed myself to have an apple a day because that was just about what I could afford. And
That
it's
was it.
my
That's all
father.
you ate.
Yeah. And then, he was sort of scrunching and seeing if he could get something, but there was nothing in the locker rooms or anything like that at that time. You had to fend for yourself. But the good part was that we all stuck together. So the good players and the worst players, because the good players, they were paid. This was in the time of shamateurism, when you were paid to show up and you had a price on your head, I almost said, but a price on your performance, and you were paid accordingly. So if you were, like one was in the beginning of one's career, you were nobody, and maybe you got tuppence halfpenny, or whatever the saying was in England, and which was all a crest sandwich. They were famous for us foreigners. That's what you got when you played in Hurlingham or Queens or wherever one played, Eastbourne. So it was tough times, but my father and mother, obviously, but they were providing the money. I was at university when I started wanting to be a professional player, and I just came home and I said, "Yeah, I'm done." I had 1 year of economics, and I thought, "Yeah, that'll last me well, or serve me well." And everybody said, "You can't do that. You've got to finish your career." I said, "Nah, I want to be a tennis player." And off I went to the Caribbean, and that's how I started. But that was all paid for by my father.
So let's go back just a little bit. You got paid in crest sandwiches for some tournaments.
Yeah, just about. And some
This
tournaments,
is
they
true.
didn't even pay you in that. And the crest sandwiches, Candy, I promise you, there was maybe a little bit of margarine on, and then a few. I mean, we used to open them up and say, "What is this?" We were foreigners. I mean, I hardly speak any English today. I speak 8 languages, but at that time, I had difficulties. But I think my face told the story.
I would love to see your face when you opened up the crest sandwiches. And I would love to see someone like Aryna Sabalenka's face when she hears this. I hope she listens. These women now are picking up $1 million checks, and you were picking up a crest sandwich which may or may not have had butter on it. How times have changed.
But Candy, that really makes my heart sing. You don't know, and I never knew how I would react, and people saying, "Oh, aren't you envious?" Not one bit. I look at these women who now play, and in all other sports, how they play, can make a living, have the life of Riley, and really, really enjoying it, because my generation, we really, really made it work. And
Mm.
all the sacrifices, I mean, it was really, really tough putting your career on the line, because that's what you did, because the federations, they owned you. If you were not in good standing, I hope you hear my inadvertent commas, then your federation would say, "No, we're not going to enter you in the Grand Slam." And you were done, because,
Yeah.
you know, then you couldn't play. And that was the power they had over us. So to see the girls trying in many cases, but also in other cases running the show, it makes my heart sing. It makes me so proud. I'm just a little bit scared that they will leave it and take it for granted, because we
Mm.
always have to fight for it. Otherwise, it will go away, the privileges.
It's a timely conversation, this, because, of course, the maternity leave pay has just been introduced by the Hologic WTA Tour. I think the PIF has very much helped, and money with Saudi, which has been criticised, hasn't it, for having the WTA Tour finale there. Up until the end of last year, there was actually a woman, Arij Mutabagani, in charge of tennis in Saudi Arabia, and she has become quite a good friend of mine. She's since been ousted for some unknown reason, having done such a brilliant job. But what do you think of the maternity pay leave now? We've got so many mothers coming back to the game.
I'm absolutely delighted. I mean, I had to have a match postponed in Stockholm. I was playing Françoise Dürr in the semis, she was number 4 in the world at that time. And so they knocked on the locker room and said, Ingrid, you're on court. And I was there nursing my daughter, who was 4 months old. And I said, so what do you suggest? What do you think I should do? And they said, oh, you've got to go on. Somebody had got hurt, so we were on earlier than expected. And there was nothing I could do, so they had to postpone the match and live television because I was nursing. They didn't have the guts to say that, but I was nursing in the dressing room. My husband was working and in Stockholm, and he couldn't come, so I nursed, and my daughter did her business and whatever, and changed the diaper, and then went into the tournament director's office and said, excuse me, you're on court. He said. I said, yes, but my daughter, could you take care of her in the meantime? So she was in the in the referee's office while mummy was playing, and I actually won, so that was all well worth it.
I've had 2 children which I've breastfed, and it's not easy to do that and then play tennis because of the consequences. How did you deal with that without, of course, getting too revolting for a lot of people listening? But that is a factor to consider, isn't it?
Well, it's a mindset. I mean, I remember the Swedish national, which I played only about 5 weeks after I had my daughter, and there were 2 young guys from my part of the country, from Malmö, and they said, "Do you want for us to take care of Helene?" And out they went, and sort of in her buggy and took care of her because I didn't have a nanny. And then when I stopped feeding, I just brought her with me at some tournaments, and she was actually on court at the Virginia Slims when I played, and then we were playing in the US Open in doubles, and Helene was on court, 4 or 5 years old, and playing with her dolls. And so Mimi Wikstedt, now sadly dead, she died very early in her 60s, a few years ago. And she and I were having so much fun. We were playing. We were 4-1 down in the first set on one of the front courts at Forest Hills. And at the changeover, my 4-year-old daughter goes, well, I would like for you to go up to the net a little bit more often. Talking about coaches, eh? And Mimi looked at me, I looked at her. We absolutely collapsed on the court. We laughed so hard. And both of us said, okay, Helene, we're going to do that. And we did. And we won. We were 4-1 and 2 breaks down. And still we won because we relaxed. And so that's a good example of relaxing is helpful.
Very pertinent as well. Diary of a Professional Tennis Coach. We've got 5-year-old Helene. Does she remember this? Does she remember playing with her dolls and watching playing tennis and acting as coach?
She remembers a lot. She was holding the French Open trophy Chrissy won. Chrissy and I were very close. We are very close. So Helene got to hold the trophy, and that was presented in the president's tribune présidentielle, as it's called, upstairs, where people sit at that time, not on the court as it is now. And of course, Helene dropped the lid on the trophy, and it went ploink, 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 ploink all the way down. So now I think they are taping the lid, so it's not going to fall off. But
I think
Helene
Federer
remembers.
did that, didn't he? Was it the Australian Open where the top came off in front of Rod Laver? I believe that happened. So Helene is not the only one.
I didn't know that.
I think that's true. That's a great story. We need to get her on the podcast next to recount stories of mummy. Now, the next subject, I suppose, and we've got a lot to get through. You weren't one of the original 9, but you were very close to the likes of Billie-Jean King and others. Can you remember a lot about the early days?
Absolutely. I just had my daughter, so I was supposed to have played in the Virginia Swim circuit, but having a daughter prevented me from doing that. And Houston, my daughter was 1 or 2 months old, so I called Gladys Heldman, I was playing doubles with with Julie. Julie Hellman and I were playing doubles for quite a long time, and I always stayed with them, so I was very close to the family. So I called Gladys and I said, Gladys, I can't be with you, but I am with you. And she
Mm.
said, yeah, okay, kid, I will give you $1 the next time I see you. And I never got the dollar, you
Oh,
know. I'm still waiting.
I'll give you $1
Yes,
next time I see you.
yeah. But she was a force, and also provided the relationship with Virginia Slims or Philip Morris through Joe Coleman, who was the big boss at uh, Philip Morris, I think it was. Yeah. So Philip Morris were very, very helpful in the whole setup in the early days, because they gave us personnel, were a lot of women who worked for Philip Morris, who was then working for the tennis and coming on the circuit, on the Virginia Slim circuit. And the whole marketing department was helping us. So without that, it would have been much tougher. That was very,
Mm.
very helpful. And of course, Billie or Billie-Jean being so clear sighted and always wanting to achieve what she had set out to achieve, that we all should be equal. And she did a tremendous job and put her career to a lot of instances. She could have minded more about her own career, but she didn't. She minded about us all and about the future of tennis. So that was terrific. But we were a whole gang of players. There were a lot of players who didn't agree with us and didn't, like I want to say, had the guts to do it. But maybe it wasn't, because a lot of Eastern Europeans who couldn't, because of their governments objecting to it, and other reasons as well. So, but those were the tough times. But there were lots of guys as well who agreed with us. So there weren't, any anti-women or anti-player, women player sentiments at all. Not that I know about, at least.
And there was amazing camaraderie, wasn't there, between you? As you said, there weren't really any coaches or entourages on tour in those days. So the women were very friendly towards each other. Did that change, though, when you stepped on court to play each other?
Money. I think when the money really got big, because we were, I mean, I was taking for I still do, but I started knowing the restaurants and places to go in Rome and Paris, thanks to the journos, and particularly the British journalists who would take us out, because they knew that we didn't have very much money. So they took us out. They knew stuff about us. They would never, ever say a word. So at times, the guys, because they were 100% male, there still are almost. There's one or two, but that's about it. Females, and they would sort of say that it was detrimental to them to know somebody, to know me, for instance, because maybe they would know some stuff which were
Mm.
slightly not for the public, but they would feel terrible divulging it. So it worked both ways, but it was a lovely, lovely atmosphere. The guys, the juniors, the women, men, coaches, we all hung out together and we all looked out for each other.
And you said you had one daughter. Did you have another child while you were playing, or had you retired by that point?
No, I waited until I stopped, and then I had my son Jake Löfdahl, or he's taken back the dots over the O, so he's Jake Löfdahl. And he is here in England, and my daughter is in Australia.
Okay. And you live, or you're based now in the UK, but obviously from Sweden. Are you surprised? And I had a conversation with Thomas Johansson at last year's Australian Open as to why there aren't very many Swedish players anymore? Because at one point, especially when I was growing up, there were so many good, particularly Swedish men. What has happened?
What did Thomas say?
Well, he was quite negative, and he was on the podcast. So this is not
Ah,
divulging anything that he wouldn't want us to know, but he was pretty negative about the whole Swedish National Tennis Federation.
well, yeah, I think we are doing a slightly better job now. Living here, I think I'm more familiar with French and British and whatever because of my other work. I worked with the ITF and
Yes.
etc. etc. So I'm well au fait with other federations. With my Swedish one, I think they missed a little bit of a trick because they never took any advice or offered any positions to former players. And, Thomas Högstedt was very instrumental in creating the Chinese tennis wonder. Brilliant coach. I was actually his agent in the beginning for a short while before I decided I do not want to be an agent, that's for sure. Anyway, and there are lots of, there are coaches. When I was on the Fed Cup and now Billie-Jean King Cup committee and Davis Cup committee, everybody would go, oh, I must rush off and have a look at our juniors and da 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 da. And everybody, we were 5 on the committee or 6 maybe. And I used to say, okay, I will go and have a look at our coaches, because almost at one time, about 5-10 years ago, a period there, I think there still is to a certain extent, Swedish coaches, but they're not coaching any Swedish guys. They're all coaching, Grand Slam champions, as in Stan Wawrinka, and all sorts of other players who've had and have Swedish coaches. Sweden, the federation didn't pick up on that one. And at one stage, I think they were so spoiled by the constant resurgent of wonderful Swedish players, and all diverse and different, server volleyers from the backcourt, temperamental wise, but we all stick together. I see all the guys all the time, and we just hug and fall about laughing about how silly we were and whatever. But a wonderful camaraderie, but so sad because we really are not very good at all anymore.
Yeah, you were mentioning Stan Wawrinka, of course, a major champion coached by Magnus Norman, who perhaps it was your best player most recently and also your best coach. But it is a shame because you think of Sweden as a tennis powerhouse, but perhaps just not in the last 5, 10, even 15 years. You've got the Ema brothers and, of
20.
course, Leo Borg, but no one you really hear about on the women's side. Are you surprised by that?
No, and I've been trying to find out, and people come, oh, you're still, if not the best, you were unbelievable, and nobody coming after you must be so relieved. I said, no, I'm absolutely. Um, you can't swear on this one. I better watch my mouth. I was really annoyed by it because I would like for Swedish women to go. There's Miriam Björklund, who steps out and I think now being engaged to
Yes.
Shapovalov.
Yep.
But that's about the only one. There was Rebecca Pettersson, but I think she's still hurt, injured. So, it's really, really sad. And I don't know if life is very good in Sweden. And, to go out on a trip in the big, wide world, and you have to start really, really early. So, I think there's a prevalence for the Eastern European countries to be very successful, because that is a wonderful way to achieve something and get out of your own environment and create a life of your own. In Sweden,
Yeah.
life is pretty good as it is, and I think that, I don't know if I'm right. It's just a sort of a shot in the dark when you're asking the question. If I would know, I'd be very, very happy, because then maybe we could do something constructive about it.
Well, maybe in the future, more players are going to come up. I'd love to go back to your career now, because we've got, if you're watching on YouTube, some graphics, and you competed in 13 editions of the Wimbledon Championship. That was your best major. I believe you lost to Olga Morozova in the fourth round in 1973. Olga was my British national team coach for quite a bit, and I played quite a lot with her daughter, Katya. And you were recently at the Queen's Club with Olga, so you seem like you have a good relationship despite the fact that she beat you.
She was so lucky to beat me. I had a bad call. We still talk about that. I mean, 100
Does
years
she agree?
after.
Does she agree
Sorry?
the call was bad?
No, of course she doesn't. This is the whole thing. This is what tennis players, when they meet. Do you remember 40-15? And I had 5-2 and I should have, yada, 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 yada. Goes on endlessly, but it's so much fun. So we spoke about it and I said, you're so bloody lucky you won that one. You never should have. Oh, it goes Olga, and off we go. Olga was, in particular, a very good doubles player. But also a very distinguished singles player. So, and I had a tough time, with Russia at that time. Was not to play around with. It was very strict and whatever. So she had a tough career as well. But we all had, but just in different matters. And I mean, she lives in England as long as I do. So we tend to come and shelter here in this wonderful country.
Well, that's nice of you to say. Are there any particular matches, apart from that one against Olga, that you remember for one reason or another? I always say when I'm doing commentary that tennis players are a bit like elephants in that they don't forget. It's unbelievable how tennis players can recount stories from 20, 30 years ago, particular points or particular shots. It's just uncanny.
Absolutely. We were having drinks. There was a sort of a exhibition thing down in the south of Sweden where I've got my summer house in Ystad. And there were about, I don't know, 5-6 guys, and we were having a drink. It's next to the sea, Baltic Sea and whatever. And you would have killed yourself laughing. I mean, there were these guys, about sort of 30, 40 years after they finished their career, sitting there talking about 15-30 in the third set, and and on it went. And all of a sudden we look at each other and started laughing. Talk about politics, and in one go, everybody goes, "No!" Talking about our tennis career. Yeah, it's hilarious. Do I remember something? I remember probably, yeah, two incidents for different reasons. I remember in Monte Carlo, I think one of my favorite tournaments, if not the favorite, on clay, because I won it. So of course it is my favorite tournament. But I I was playing. I won the first set easily. I was going for dinner, so I thought I better get cracking here. Got distracted, lost my concentration, lost the second set, and the woman, a French girl I was playing, off she toddled because you could have an intermission after the second set at that time. So off she went, and I thought, oh, this is not on. I am in a rush, and I've got another set to play. This is ridiculous. I was so angry. I sat and I was a smoker. I smoked about one cigarette a day or once a week, but it was very cool to smoke at that time. So I smoked red Marlboro. So I sat down on the bench overlooking the wonderful Mediterranean. I mean, the club is so beautiful. It must be the most beautiful club in the world.
Agreed.
And flipped out the red Marlboro and lit up a fag. And I was sitting having a fag in between the second and third set. And then I won 6-1 or 6-love in the third set. And I thought, oh, well, that's done. And everybody was dying, saying, Ingrid, you can't do that. I did, and I won. Okay. So that's number one. So
Yep.
don't copy that, young people. But
No.
young people, they're
I
not
don't
as
think that's
stupid as
allowed on
we
court
were.
these days.
I don't think so. And besides, nobody smokes anymore. Thank goodness, because it's such a silly thing to do. And the second one was opening Wimbledon, not because of me, obviously, but on Tuesdays, women used to open Wimbledon from the female side. That's when the champion from the former year would play whomever they were drawn to play. And I drew Billie-Jean in the first round, and she was the
Amazing.
defending champion. Now, Billie-Jean and I are close, and I'm close to her wife, Ilana, as well. And this is, we're all, I mean, we hit up at Queen's the week before and whatever, and Rosie Casals, we're all a big gang. And so I go out. I had never played a match on a grass court. I had no idea. So I'm out there with 12,000 people and 20 million television and whatever. And Manolo Santana, who was a fabulous player and a fabulous guy and the winner of Wimbledon, he said, Ingrid, or we were talking Spanish, Ingrid, when you go out, just take time, look in all four sides, northwest, southern, and east, and just look and say, you. Now, he used a different sort of language because I'm a lady, I'm not going to use that sort of language. You look, you look at the people, they've come here and paid to come and watch you. Now, you would beat every single one of them. Now, look at them and then forget about them. And that was the best advice ever, because I did. And I did it very slowly and very deliberately, and just looked and I thought, yeah, I could do this. And at the hit up and whatever, and I was fine. And I played a stonker of a match and I lost I want to say 7-5, 8-6, I think, 8-6. And then I remember being 5-2 down in the second. And I thought, I don't want to leave this court. I really don't want to leave this court. And I'm playing the world number one and whatever. I was absolutely going nuts. I didn't want to lose, but I did. So I lost 6-2 or 6-3. I can't remember. But that was a wonderful, wonderful experience. I played more times, but that was the first and the most memorable one. Beautiful.
Your first match on grass against Billie-Jean King at the Wimbledon Championships. That's a pretty good story.
If you're going to lose, do it with style. I mean, honestly, I could have gone on court 18 and lost to somebody nobody had heard about. But losing first round to Billie-Jean King, that was powerful. That was good.
Amazing.
You
Did you ever beat Billie-Jean?
No, I didn't. I beat Yvonne Goolagong when she was world number one. But that was the only world number one I beat, actually, sadly.
Okay.
I didn't play very much. I'm much more contemporary with Christy because I went to university. You know, I was sort of 21 before I started. So I'm contemporary with Borg, and much more with Christy and Martina than I am with Billie and my own generation. So it's a bit weird there, but good.
Did you ever play Chrissy or Martina?
Yeah, I did. I think I played Martina, I think, in Rome, and Chrissy in doubles only. Here in England, I'm really bad. You know, I don't remember all those things.
There's a lot of matches. I have to say that Martina was my idol growing up because I loved serve and volley. That's the way I played. I was probably born a bit too late because the power game had started to come in, and I felt I couldn't serve and volley particularly well, particularly successfully. But I just loved her aggressive style. Were you a serve and volleyer?
Yes, I was. Very much so. I learned how to play on clay. That's my win at Monte Carlo. And actually, I think I'm, if not the only one of the very few who's won both singles and doubles, men and women. So I'm a bit proud about that one. But with Martina, you know, Chrissy and I was, or we still are, but was then very, very close. And Martina and Chrissy having their big rivalry. Martina was unbelievably, she's got the biggest heart of anybody you want to know, and is so sweet. And I remember I was staying in Chrissy and John's house in the desert. They had a place there, And then Chris's parents-in-law, they were coming visiting and said, "Oh, you can't." And I said, "Oh, okay, never mind. I'd just go somewhere else," because I was in the States for a long time. And Martina immediately, who was Chris's biggest rival, and they weren't that close then. They were always
Yeah.
same kin, but they weren't close because they had different sets of friends or whatever. Martina, without stopping for a second, said, "Ingrid, you can have my house." So I actually, with my then boyfriend, we stayed in Martina's house in Mission Hill. I don't know if she still has it, but I mean, this is the way we all worked, sort of looked out for each other. But Martina is very special, and so is Chrissy, and so is Billy, and so is Rosie, and so is just about everybody except for those who are not, which I'm not going to talk about.
That will do that on the second edition of Diary of a Professional Tennis Coach. So, in your opinion, we briefly touched on the fact that there aren't too many women coaches, and I've been on quite a few panels and discussions and webinars about why this is. And obviously, there's a few. We've had Patricia Tarabini on the podcast, coach of Anna Kalinskaya. I'd love to get Sandra Zanevska, the coach of Marta Kostyuk, on. Of course, there's Biljana Veselinovic, who coaches Katie Bolter. But those are the three that sort of pop to mind that aren't mothers, sisters, aunts, etc. Why do you think we have a problem with that?
I'm a bit thoughtful when you say everybody's talking about the coaches. I would like to talk about the bench. You look at the benches in women's tennis and men, and I would venture to say there's 1% women on the benches. There are 6 or 8 or 22 guys sitting there in their hats and looking very morose and mumbling and "No, come on, all this," which is great. But where's a woman? Why isn't there a nutritionist, a physical one, a chiropractor, a mental coach? I mean, Iga Swiatek, she's got one, but
Yes.
they are very, very few. So let's talk about the whole gang there, because I think that is more to the point than picking out one. You look at journalists. I mean, now there are commentators, they're coming more and more. However, there's always a thing, men should do men's matches. Why? Because men do women's matches. What
Correct.
is wrong with women doing men's matches? And, in all the criteria, why can't women write about men's sport? I was looking on Saturday in one of the papers, and there were 16 male reporters, 2 female. And I'm a huge fan of rugby. I mean, I was watching rugby. It was quite a good match, actually, against Italy on Saturday. And
Italy,
cricket.
England match.
Yeah, absolutely. And but you look at the sport. There are loads of guys who are commentating, and writing about women's cricket, and all the cricket people. Why isn't there a woman's view on the whole thing? It really makes me angry.
And why do you think that is? And I will mention that, say, Coco Gauff, her psychologist, Maria, obviously is female. Emma Navarro, part of her strength and conditioning team, one half is a female. It's starting to happen more. As you said, Daria Abramovic, obviously omnipresent in the Iga Swiatek bench. We're starting to see a few more women, but I agree with you. Commentating, it's becoming a little bit more even. The camera person, all men from my experience, a lot of photographers, men, a few women. I will say that the ATP Tour, and they employ me, and I was sent out to Acapulco a week and a half ago. So they are sending women to do men's tournaments more and more. And I think we're so appreciative. As long as, I don't know how you feel, but I'm very insightful in that the women actually need to know their stuff. They can't just go out because they're pretty or they sound nice or whatever. The women have to actually work a lot harder, I think, than the men to make sure that they're there on merit, as opposed to you're there because you're a female.
Correct. And this is also a positive for somebody hiring a woman, because that they are really going to go 100% plus, because they really have to justify themselves all the time and be that little bit better because they are women, or we are women, which is good. I mean, I don't resent that at all. Somebody asked the other day if I in my career had men allies, and I just looked at it, I said, what are men allies? So, women are pretty bad on being allies as well. Uh, if not as bad as men. Men are pretty good, actually, because I've never had a problem there. However, I see at times, and I don't know if that's out of choice or luck or bad luck, if there's one woman on a board, it is difficult, or used to be not so long ago, difficult to find number two. And
Right.
I don't know if women are supporting and being allied in the effort of having a few more women up at the top. The bottom is pretty thick with women. The middle is a bit scarce. So what do? We have to have the middle being larger or more numerous, so that there's a choice when it comes to a board position or whatever. People are looking around, where's the next one going to come from? There's nobody there in the middle layer. And I think if we rather look at the middle layer than at the top positions, because there are top positions which are now occupied by women. Now it will be very interesting to see if we are going to be equally good in promoting women to the next step.
And that brings us nicely on, because we've got a little graphic below you again if you're watching YouTube, which reminds everyone that you were on the head of women's professional tennis for the International Tennis Federation. Most people know it as the ITF. Started there in 1995. So just talk us through that period of your life when you've retired from tennis and then decide to take on this role.
It was a natural role. My father was the president of the club. I've always been involved in tennis as such. So I had my own company before, marketing and project company, and worked a lot in media. I did, a good 10 years as a sort of Sue Barker, the role, you are both the commentator, the big profile in sports programs and sports in general. So that was a lot of fun. And then all of a sudden, in the beginning of my 50s, I was employed, and I thought, blimey, this is good. Now I can go and steal some stamps and pens and I don't have to do this, that, and the other. It was brilliant. I absolutely loved my work. I shared the position with Debbie Jevons, who is now the chairman of Wimbledon. Sorry, I always use chairman because I can't say chairwoman. I think that's a bad
Doesn't
one.
sound
And a
right.
chair is that's a furniture. I mean, I think chairman, that is not gender derived. I just, anyway. So we shared the role. I was in charge of women's professional tennis worldwide, and she was in charge of Fed Cup, which it was then called, and the Olympics. So we worked together for about 3 years, 4 years. And I loved it because that was bringing up, the ITF, they got to 25s up to 75. And then it was the tour. So I was on the tour board as well, representing the ITF. So I was on the tour board then, because then I worked for the global sponsors, Sanex, or Sarah Lee, as they were. So that was a very, very interesting job, and tried to make the distribution of prize money a bit more fair. It was very top heavy, so I rewrote that. I instigated a program called Feed Ups. So the winner and runner up got a free place either in the qualification or the main draw in one of the lowest denominated tour tournaments, which was 125,000 at that time, and our biggest one was 75. So that, because we needed to have a little bit of circulation, because it was very, very mid reef heavy. It was, it's supposed to be a triangle with a lot of players on the bottom and then coming through the system. They never came through because everybody was beating each other, and they ended up at the end of the year as they started the year. So it didn't work. But with that feed up system, all of a sudden it started working. Also, I instigated a rule of when you couldn't play the full amount of tournaments until you were 16.
Oh, that
And
was you.
actually,
That was clever.
but I had so much anger directed towards me. How dare you instigate a rule like that? My daughter wants to play. And I said, I'm not so sure about that. And actually, two of the young girls, and I won't mention any names, but they came up and said very sort of shyly and under their breath, thank you for doing that. Otherwise, I might have been killed by the amount of tournaments I would have to play.
Yeah.
So that was, I was proud of that. I was also proud of instigating primary healthcare providers as the trainers, but primary healthcare providers at the lower nomination of our tournament. I had to fight, I think, a year or two before the ITF said yes, that we could have primary healthcare providers in the tournament. And they were about 10, 75,000, and then 20, 50,000. And it's a big cost. And I always said it is very, very important for young girls to have somewhere to go, and even older girls as well, or women, to go somewhere where they can talk openly, because they're medics and they are sworn by silence. They cannot talk. So for always having a safe room to be able to go to have a chat if that's what you want, but also really if you have a problem, because there are problems. And it's very difficult for a 15, 16-year-old, I think, to be responsible for a family's well-being and their income. And maybe you're not old enough to be able to make the right decisions because you don't have that experience, and it's really
Of course
difficult.
not. Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I've been sent a clip this morning on the Jelena Dokic documentary series that's coming out, and we know about her well publicized problems with her father. There was also Mirjana Lucic when I was playing. I remember, I think her whole family had to run from dad, and I think the rule that you instigated about 16-year-olds was absolutely the right one, and we've seen it benefits players like Mira Andreeva, who's now only 17, has just won a 1,000 level, is an absolute sensation. But you can really drive these players, I think, perhaps too hard, depending on their financial situation and lots of other things. But a lot of the parents don't know any better, do they? So it's push, 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 get the money, get the money. But actually, it's going to hurt the player in the long run. So you had amazing foresight to realize that. Where did that come from?
Oh, I was lucky with my parents, very lucky. And then also having been a player myself and fending for yourself, uh, and having a brother, I had to fend myself. He was a big brother, and very much thanks to him, I am the woman I am today, because I had to fight for everything. You say, "Oh, you stupid, you ugly," blah. So at the ripe age of 13, 14, I was reading Bertrand Russell, the big philosophers. I was listening to opera and loving it, because that's what my brother did. So, yeah, and him always, anybody who came up to me and said, "What do you want with my kid sister?" He had my back. And having that security as a girl, and I was I was much more of a boy than a girl. I had a crew cut, and we ran faster than anybody, and loved sports. And a doll. Nah, I don't think so. Give me a dog, that'd be fine. So I think with my brother, always um, letting me know he's there, his arms around my shoulders, even though he was so uh, in my face the whole time. But that told me as well, I don't need to ask for excuses for being aggressive or trying or wanting to. It's okay. And then if you don't succeed, there's somebody there. So I think a lot. I was very lucky with my family background.
And let's now bring it on, Ingrid, the final question to present day. And we now know that a lot of the women are hitting the ball harder on court than the men off the ground. A couple of them, Madison Keys and Aryna Sabalenka, have just contested the Australian Open final. They're two of the world's best. What are you thinking now when you watch women's tennis go on? And are those players, if you're around them, are they grateful to the likes of you? We know that everyone knows Billie-Jean King and what she did and the original nine, but are other players from a different generation sort of recognised for all that they have done for the game?
I think you can't bag them all together. I think some are. I remember at the Fed Cup in Belarus, Azarenka came up and said, "Thank you, Ingrid, for what you did." And this is about, 10 years ago or something. So has anybody else said something? I don't know. I think, at certain events, we've had some events, some WTA events, about 10 years ago. Then something came up. I never worked for the WTA. I worked for the ATP. So it's with the women's game, I come from a different angle. So if they're grateful or not, I think it's a bit irrelevant. What I would like to see is for them to take care of our game, to be mindful and saying, is there anything I can do to make it better? So coming to me and say thank you, although I mean I love it. Don't mistake on that one. But if I don't, the main thing and the main reason is let's all pull together and make it better. Because if we can, that'll be absolutely wonderful. Because there's so many good things about women's tennis now. I miss the rivalries. I would love to have some rivalries. I love the way Sabalenka plays, but honestly, I hate listening to her screaming. I really do, and that's me. I've never met Raya face to face, and I'm told she's a lovely girl and very well liked by everybody, and I'm sure she is. Could she please stop screaming, and then I can watch her without turning the volume down on the television? She's a great
Well,
player.
maybe she'll listen or watch and take heed of your request.
She'll probably say, "Not a chance. What has she got to do with it?" And I would
I'm
take
winning
that
major
for an
titles
answer
now.
as
I'm
well.
keeping the noise up. And are you surprised finally how hard they're hitting the ball?
Not really. That's material as well. You try to, I would like to make that, reverse that and say, get a wooden club, as I like to call them, tennis racket, and try to make a drop shot on that. You don't know Chrissy Evert's silky touch in caressing that over with that piece of wood in her hand.
Yeah.
The things we executed with, and it's not that long ago. Borg and whatever. We all played with wooden rackets, and the skills were different. So with today's material, I could probably hit as hard. Try to prove the difference.
I love it.
I
So
am.
let's test that out at the All England Club one day.
Let's do that. I challenge, or is it you challenging me? Which way is
Well,
it?
let's go 50-50 and then see at the end.
and the one losing will pay for lunch. How about that?
I think that's a brilliant idea. Francis Tiafoe and Tommy Paul just had a bet on the Super Bowl because Francis loves the Washington team, and Tommy Paul's a big fan of the Philadelphia Eagles, who won. And I think they had a contest, and the loser had to wear the opponent's hat. So Tiafoe is currently in Indian Wells wearing a Philadelphia Eagles hat. So we've got a little bet like that going on. But I'd be very happy to pay for your lunch. Absolutely. Ingrid Löfdahl Bentzer, you've been an absolute revelation. I knew this was going to be a great interview. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Candy. Thank you for asking, and long live women's tennis.
What a brilliant ending. Thanks, Ingrid, and speak soon.
Thanks. Take care.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
for watching Diary of a Professional Tennis Coach. Please like, subscribe, and share, and we'll be back soon with another great episode.